Alright, what's going on, guys? Over the past week, we have been doing a ton of investigation into the Elden Ring DLC trailer, and although we are about 4 months out from its release, this period of waiting presents an ideal opportunity to dive headfirst into speculation and attempt to unravel the mystery set forth for us by FromSoftware, not only within the trailer, but also through things currently in the game that now deserve a second look. And so today I want to go back into it and break down even more details that we missed, because there are so many secrets in this trailer, and even as of now, we've barely scratched the surface. Some of these are very weird and equally mind-blowing, and while we will speculate on the lore a bit about them, keep in mind that until the DLC drops, we won't know any certainties. So as we begin today, if you want to stay up to date on all things Elden Ring DLC and enjoy the lore and discussion, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and now let's begin. To start off this video, we'll begin all the way at the end of the trailer. Not with this shot of who we believe to be Miquella, but the very final scene that shows off the collector's edition, which is now available to pre-order. This shot gives us a good look at the Messmer figure, with lots of details about him we'll discuss later, but more importantly, let's take a look at the art book, tucked away in the bottom left-hand corner. Here we can see 3 images of concept art that you probably never gave a second look, but these actually contain images of areas that we didn't see in the trailer. First off, we can see this image of a massive castle, with that giant archway in the back, which did make an appearance on the horizon, and appears to be catching the sap of the tree. The castle has a very bleak nature to it, but aside from the archway, doesn't appear to have anything too striking going on, at least in this artwork. This shot here though is much more evocative, showing a bridge full of spears, a very saturated sky, and these basins along the bridge burning with yellow fire, and based on the color, I think it's possible they could be burning the sap. Now this bridge shot is likely the bridge we can see in the art in the left. Given that they do share a page in the art book, it's likely they're the same location. This third image here is the hardest one to make out details in, but appears to show a courtyard within the castle with the same color of sky as we saw in the bridge scene, spears sticking up around the area, and at first glance this image looks very much like a boss arena. But the main thing that stands out in this image is the massive statue of Marika in the background. But one detail that's very important is that this statue is missing its head, so whether it be due to time or the fact that the Land of Shadow was sealed away, whoever owns this castle obviously doesn't care much for Marika. But what do you make of these pieces of concept art? Now let's talk about veils, such as the massive one we can see hanging off the shadow tree in the trailer. We've already established that it matches up with the veil in the Queen's bedchamber, and that is because the veil we see in the trailer was placed there by Queen Marika to conceal the Land of Shadows from the outside world. And there's also another veil used by Queen Marika, that of course being the Mimic's Veil, which the player can use to turn into an object of their environment and conceal themselves from others around. And this veil is also called Marika's Mischief, perhaps in reference to what she did to the Land of Shadow. But there is also another veil in the game, this one called the Concealing Veil, and it has a description that reads, part of one of the concealing veils used by the assassins on the Night of Black Knives. And when we look at this in context of the lore of the Black Knife Assassins, this may have been a tie to the Land of Shadow all this time. The Black Knife Assassins were said to be Numen, with close ties to Queen Marika, a race that came from somewhere outside the Lands Between. And although the Numen and Nox are denizens of the Eternal Cities, that place isn't outside the Lands Between. So I think a good theory to have going into the DLC is that the Black Knife Assassins were never from the Eternal Cities at all, but rather the Land of Shadow, and would also explain why we find them in Ordenia Liturgical Town, wielding that same concealing veil, probably trying to find their way home following the footsteps of Miquella, just like we'll be doing in the Land of Shadow. But one other point of note you may not have noticed is that Messmers Snake is no ordinary snake. This one actually has wings on it. Now the trailer does a great job at making these wings look as if they're part of Messmer's armor, but if we look very closely, we see them move with the snake, and we can see that they are detached from Messmer altogether, just slightly hidden by his cloak. Look closely at this shot here. You can see a little tiny wing growing out of the back of the snake, almost as if it's in the mid-process of becoming a dragon. But another point about this snake is that it doesn't appear to have a tail. Now this could also be a good point of concealment, but the 2 heads of the snake appear to be connected as if it's one body. Again, referencing the collector's edition, the box it comes in is consistently adorned with images of 2-headed snakes. But we really don't see anything like this snake in the Lands Between. So how do you think it came to have this form, and what do you think it means? One of my favorite shots in the trailer is this here, with the player fighting this dancer in a shining blue flower field. It all looks very cool, and while the action in the front may catch your attention, there's something very strange in the background. Take a look here. Aside from the bright flowers and the massive gravestones, we can see two odd looking structures, and at first I thought they were just toppled buildings. But then many of you guys pointed out to me, these look much more like the backs of ships, just without all the sails, and almost as if they're made of stone. And upon closer inspection, that is exactly what they look like. Now, we've made a whole video breaking down the history of ships in the sea and the lands between, and it does appear that ships used to be a big part of the lands between. We can even see galleons in the middle of the sea next to Leyndell, but there's no ports or harbors anywhere, at least not anymore. The closest thing we can find in the lands between is a big shipwreck outside Radon's arena, one that they thought was important enough to feature in concept art. So what do you think these ships are? Who did they belong to? And why are they now landlocked? Another inhabitant of the lands between that's said to originate outside are the bell-bearing hunters, denizens of a land called Yohid, which is said to have long since vanished. Their armor has very interesting motifs on it, as noticed by fellow lore tuber Crunchy. Their medals have the faces of lions, and also features a very unsettling image of a woman, and another that appears to have snakes biting her head. Now, lions are something we see quite a few times in the trailer, not only with this lion dance boss, but also as statues on altars throughout the area, part of a culture that existed before the Erdtree. Now, I don't want to imply that the Briar Knights are from this culture, but perhaps they share aspects of it, and we can tie that in with Elimer of the Briar, a bell-bearing hunter that took over the shaded castle, usurping it from the House Marais. And one of the most unique aspects of those belonging to that house are their masks, which feature faces in place of their own, and I couldn't help but notice similarities between many of the ones we can see in the trailer. These two characters specifically look as though they could belong to House Marais, albeit with some thematic differences in their armor. Tanith specifically is said to be foreign, and had no issues with Rykard's blasphemy, so there's a lot of evidence here that the story of these people may continue in the DLC, or at least their cultures that disappeared with the rising of the Erdtree. In the last trailer details video I made, I talked about these monks we can see in the trailer, and how I believe they're references to that old culture and the practice of birthing trees, which may be totally wrong, but if it is the case, there are also many other things throughout Leyndell that potentially harbor back to that time in the Land of Shadow. For example, we already established that the Queen's bedchamber and its veil are direct symbolism with the veil over the Land of Shadow, but the exterior of the bedchamber also holds secrets. The overall design of this building is fundamentally different than everything else in Leyndell, although at first glance you wouldn't really know it. The exact facade of the bedchamber is entirely unique, but because arches are a big motif in Leyndell architecture, it causes it to blend in with the rest. In this shot right here, take a look at these ruins in the background. We saw these ruins over a year ago in the initial DLC image, and back then, I tried to find any building in the game that lined up with these, and the only one that was remotely close was the facade of the Queen's bedchamber. If you remove the Erdtree iconography, then the facade becomes almost identical to the shape of these ruins. Now again, it's not perfect, but it is by far the closest thing in the game, and back then I didn't know what to think of it, but now it makes a lot of sense. It may also explain why there's this basin for collecting sap, but in a gazebo that's covered. Given that sap collection may be a major practice in the Land of Shadow, given the monk statues and the design of her bedchamber, this too may just be a relic or a memory of the place in which she became a god. But these are just a bunch of theories, ideas, and observations I picked up in the trailer, a lot of rambles that I needed to put down in video format, and that I hope made enough sense. Again, a lot of these may become entirely false when the DLC drops, but right now is one of the only times we get to talk like this, speculate, and run wild with ideas. I look forward to hearing y'all's thoughts down in the comments section below, and I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, be sure to leave a like on it, and subscribe if you're new around here. But with all that, I will catch you in the next one.